This is one of my favorite subjects about one of the perhaps most three greatest artists that have ever lived, Michelangelo Buonarroti. Notice I'm not trying to twist words there, but in the Italian vernacular, when you say the verbs, ours is A-E-I-O-U. But in French and in Italian and Spanish, it's R-A-E-O-U. So the verbs or the vowels sound differently. So when I say Michelangelo Buonarroti, I'm speaking about one of the greatest artists who have ever lived. He lived during the Renaissance, the 15th century, and of course his style imitated the Greeks and the Romans during the classical period around 500 BC. His subject matter, however, and we know that word, subject matter, was mostly biblical. He did a lot of biblical characters, and he worked for the church quite a bit because the church was a major patron of the arts. Why? Because the church needed painting and sculpture to help teach biblical subject matter. People could not read or write. So here we are with one of the greatest artists who has ever lived. He did so many famous works. The one that's most famous was his Pietà that he did at age 25. Another, which you see on the right here, his David, 18 feet, solid marble cut or carved from a single block of marble. His Moses, which we will see as a giant. Moses was supposed to have been 120 years old when he died, but yet Michelangelo portrays him as a masculine, Herculean-looking physical body with beard, and it's just so exciting what an artist can do and what he did with the marble. Most of us know that he did the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. That's 33 panels of Old Testament works, biblical works, the prophets, Adam and Eve, and of course the creation. Then the Medici family was the ruling family of Florence at the time of the Renaissance, the High Renaissance, and he wanted to do a family chapel, some 40 pieces of sculpture. He never finished it, but he did many works toward it. Then there's the Last Judgment, which is in the Sistine Chapel. He did from the ceiling. It took him 4.5 years, and then of course the Last Judgment is on the front wall of the Sistine Chapel. That's a fresco, and what a work that is. It took him 5 years. The Madonna on the stairwell, and of course he was an architect and designed the dome of St. Peter's. So Michelangelo Buonarroti was the epitome of excellence, hard work. He was very versatile and, of course, magnificent achievement. He did the ceiling, which is in the center, the Pietà on the right, and then Moses on the bottom right. He was born in 1475 and he died in 1564. Now I will never put that on a test, but I do want you to remember that he lived 89 years. And he was master, and you talk about versatility, he was master of sculpture, of painting, architecture. Then he was a poet, and finally he was a fortifications engineer. Michelangelo, the Pietà, when he was 25, I have to 50, but he was 25, when he carved it from a single block of marble. And this is what made him famous. That finger that sticks out from the Pietà is the most magnificent piece of carving ever achieved, because he did it from a solid block of marble. He would place the faces of his heroes, the people who were heroes in his life, and he would make those as biblical subject matter. So the face of God that we will see in the fresco in the Sistine Chapel was really his father's picture. He loved to draw, and this unit is about drawing, and Michelangelo would sometimes do 400 drawings before he would do one panel of the Sistine Chapel. He studied anatomy, and he was so enthusiastic about anatomy. He wanted to know every muscle, every vein, and he would sneak into the morgues at night and cut up bodies in order to study the muscle structure and make drawings of the physical muscles of people. His greatest works, however, were in sculpture, Pietà, and he did 4 of them, 4 Pietàs. Look at this, created at age 25. The face on the Madonna here is really what he believed to be his mother's picture. And of course, a Pietà, which we will study in a moment, is Mary mourning over the crucified body of Christ. Anyone who does that is creating a Pietà. So he made the marble look like it was flowing in the wind. But that finger on the right side over there was the most remarkable piece of carving because he did it from a single block of marble using chisels. Had he slipped one time, he could not go down to the Home Depot and buy some crazy glue or Gorilla Glue. That was unethical. But yet he knew marble so well that he could achieve what he did, and no one has been able to duplicate him since. He spent 9 years in a room in the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel is part of the Vatican, and to the right of the cathedral or basilica is the Sistine Chapel. This building with the triangle over here on the left side, that's the Sistine Chapel. And this, of course, is a close-up of it on the bottom right. The Sistine Chapel is where he spent 9½ years of his life. Yes, he painted in fresco, and he painted 9½ years in this Sistine Chapel. 4½ on the ceiling, and 5 years on the painting you see to the front, where it's above the 2 red doors. That's called the Last Judgment. What did he use for paint and to keep the permanence of the paint? It's called fresco, and it's called a fresco is a painting in wet plaster. So this is the magnificence of the Sistine Chapel today. You walk through those doors, you'll see a stove in the back, which when a pope passes away, they all come, the cardinals come into this room and vote and ballot. And then, of course, if no one is nominated or becomes pope, they send up black smoke. Then they take this stove, but when they elect a pope, they send up white smoke. And in St. Peter's Square, there are usually thousands of people awaiting to see who will be the next pope. So here we see these 33 panels, 60 feet up from the floor. Michelangelo painted each one of them. Sometimes he had some assistants, but he would throw the assistants out and work at night. He was so involved in his work. Notice the emphasis on the physique of these figures. They're robust, they're muscular, they're Herculean, imitating the Greek and Roman style of the 15th century. So when you go into this room, and I'm sure all of you will get a chance to go to the Sistine Chapel, you will be in awe with what you see that this man could accomplish right up here in this little room up next to St. Peter's Basilica. A basilica is a church, so the cathedral is called St. Peter's Basilica. Here we have a close-up of the Last Judgment. That's based on Dante's Inferno, where Christ comes back on the day of reckoning, and those who have hearkened to the commandments and been according to their teaching, he went, or you would go to heaven. But those who had not would go into purgatory. So here you see Christ coming back, clean shaven, looking like a Herculean athlete, and you see the people going up into heaven and those going, of course, to purgatory. There was one cardinal who didn't like Michelangelo painting nude figures, and he kept giving him a hard time and a hard time. So finally, Michelangelo painted his face in those going to purgatory, and that made him furious. He went to the Pope, says, I want he put my picture up there. And the Pope told him, I can't take you out of hell. You have to stay where you are on that wall. And of course, that was a humorous, true story. So you see the Last Judgment on the left with the blue, and then you see the panels. 9.5 years of this man's life was spent in this room. This, of course, is the Pope's residence, and every week at 12 o'clock on Wednesday and 12 o'clock on Sunday, the window opens up and the Pope gives an address to people in St. Peter's Square. This is St. Peter's Square, and you see an obelisk there. An obelisk was an invention of the Egyptians. And if you wanted to show that you conquered Egypt, you would have an obelisk around. But really, the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is an obelisk. An obelisk was used by the Egyptians sometimes to determine where the North Star would be located. So we're walking right now and touring St. Peter's Square. And I expect all of you to travel there. I expect you to go and see every aspect of this work, particularly the works of Michelangelo. So remember, the Sistine Chapel is this building up here with the aerial. And inside the chapel, the centerpiece, this represents God touching Adam, giving him life. But whose face is that to the right? That's Michelangelo's father. Notice how Adam looks so Herculean. That's the Greek style. So Michelangelo had a mentor. We all stand on someone's shoulders. And one day, Michelangelo, Lorenzo de' Medici was touring the gardens, sculpture gardens, and he noticed how Michelangelo had done this magnificent work, and he criticized and said, well, it looks, the teeth look so good compared to the man's face. And Michelangelo, rather than taking it in a negative way, went back and fixed it up. And Lorenzo de' Medici invited him into the palace, and he could be around all the princes. He could go to the best schools, wear the best clothes, and of course, he was in the Medici group. He knew most of the Medicis, who eventually became popes. He designed the Dome of St. Peter's. He completed a number of sonnets. He was a great poet, and he completed a number of engineering fortification projects that people might think are not important, but he was a very important designer. So the Last Judgment, he was 60s. He was in his 60s when he did the Last Judgment. He was in his 30s when he did the ceiling. So on the left over on the side, that's the cardinal I was telling you about. They kept giving Michelangelo a hard time and complaining, and so Michelangelo said, I'll fix him up. And he put this cardinal's image into the Last Judgment. On the left, you see a picture that I took, and of course, the Sistine Chapel fresco has been cleaned since then, has been cleaned to bring out all those rich colors. A lot of people didn't realize, but Michelangelo was a great colorist. And so in architecture, he did the dome. The dome is of such that you can take an elevator up there and walk around it. I've done it at least 3 times. And what a fascinating thing to know that you're walking around the dome that Michelangelo Buonarroti designed. It sits above the canopy and down on the right. That's the spot where Peter was crucified upside down. So we see the dome of St. Peter's, a magnificent architectural feat by Michelangelo Buonarroti. And of course, we're in front now of St. Peter's Basilica, and that's the largest Christian church, or the largest Catholic church in the world. The largest church in the world is the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. Now, St. Peter's Basilica, remember, that's another name for a church, and facade means the front of it. Inside, we have a canopy, and above that canopy, as you just saw, is the dome of St. Peter's. This canopy was designed by a Baroque artist by the name of Bernini, and he put this. Baroque had a very ornate character to it. This throne of St. Peter's, he did that. And he did a piece of sculpture of St. Peter that many people kiss the foot. And all the popes are buried under this floor. You can go down the steps, and over 240 some popes are buried below this floor. When you look at television on Christmas Eve, usually when you see the Pope conducting a mass, it's right here at this spot in St. Peter's Basilica. This is what we will, when we study architecture, show you as a transept. And so you can see now that you have the canopy, but right above the canopy is the dome of St. Peter's, where you can go up in an elevator and walk around it. Remember, this is the spot where they consider Peter was crucified. And he said, instead of crucifying me straight up, please give me the honor of turning me upside down so that I will not have the same glory that Christ had. What a fantastic dome. Look at the emphasis on symmetry here. And we talked about symmetry when we talked about balance. Another of his works, which is used all over the world, but there's one exact replica of this. There's one in the museum, and then there's one outside in the courtyard. This is his David. The Greeks believed that the age between 18 and 21 was a man or woman's zenith. So David is pictured here as a Herculean warrior, and even his hand there, the right hand, appearing to be larger, but he represented the peasants. And this is what Michelangelo did. He took a single block of marble and carved this magnificent image of what he thought David would look like. And remember, when you're an artist, you have the power to make it look as large or as young or as old as you would like. And so out of marble, look on the left there, you can see he knew every muscle. He knew the veins, and of course was able to put them into his work. So we've been talking about a pietà. A pietà is Mary mourning over the crucified body of Christ. That's what it is. If I were to paint that, it would be a pietà. Michelangelo did 4 pietas, and he did one in which he put his own image into it. Then there's the one he did when he was 25, and he did a third one, which you see here. And then there was one he did. He worked on 2 weeks before he died at age 89. But this one was the one that won him world fame. I took this picture in Rome. Right now they have a bulletproof glass in front, and you have to take the picture through that. But maybe about 25 years ago, some protester decided he was going to attack it, and did so with a hammer, And of course, they had to they went back and got ancient glues, and they put it back together, the part that he had broken off, and then they put it behind bulletproof glass. So here's that famous Pietà carved out of a single block of marble. And what a magnificent piece of sculpture it is. There you see that finger. He could make the marble almost look like it was flowing. And he could make the material on the garments look like they were flowing, yet that was marble. He designed many palazzos, and we call them plazas, but they are squares, and they always put sculpture. And there's a term I want you to be familiar with. You see the horse and the rider. Now, a horse and a rider is called an equestrian monument. Again, a horse and a rider is called an equestrian monument. So whenever you see a horse and a rider, piece of sculpture like this, it's called an equestrian monument. This is the famous cathedral in Milan, Italy. And of course, how beautiful and symmetrical it is when we talk about design. Last but not least, it says Moses. And it's in an area that we would call a niche, N-I-C-H-E. A niche is, and you've heard the expression, he carved out his own niche. But sculptors used to put their works inside of a niche so that the background of it would form a frame. The shadow would form a frame. So we have Michelangelo's Moses. Look at those arms. Look at those arms and legs. If he were to stand up he'd probably be about 10 feet tall. Look at the power that he has in those arms. And of course, the face. He's supposed to represent a man who's 120 years old. And that's what Moses was when he led them from Egypt. He was 80, and they walked for 40 years. So here's this Herculean-looking person. And again, it's Michelangelo's interpretation of what Moses looked like, this giant, powerful person. And you see the power of an artist to convey biblical thought and emphasis, and even portray almost a state of fear of these biblical characters because of their size and their power. So sitting in a niche around the corner from St. Peter's Basilica is his Moses. And I certainly hope that you all get a chance to go and see it as it is. So again, what a pleasure it is to present to you the life and works of Michelangelo. And what I want you to do is answer some general quiz questions that I'm going to give you shortly. And I want you to do an excellent job, as you always do, on these 12 questions.